Hey everybody, Dirili here. Thank you so much for joining me again for another episode of Hakuouki Demon of the Fleeting Blossom. We are on Sanosuke Harada's route. And remember, this is my amateur reading channel with no edits, or very few edits at least. And to listen to better readings, please visit my main channel, link in the description below, just plain Dirili. But for now, let us continue on with Harada here. You can just sit back, relax, and let me read you a story. I can't possibly figure out what's happening to Father if I'm stuck here. I keep forgetting that controls are different for English games than they are for Japanese games, and so I'm used to playing the Japanese games, so I keep clicking the Japanese buttons instead of the English buttons. Only Hijikata can give me permission to leave, and he's gone. All I could do was wait. Lamenting things I couldn't change wouldn't improve my situation, and would arguably make it worse. Still, there was at least one thing I had to be thankful for. At least they've all been nice to me. I knew I couldn't trust the men of the Shinsengumi completely. They were, after all, men who could take life in the blink of an eye. It would be all too easy for the next life they took to be mine. They're nice men deep down, right?
Has anybody called you gullible yet?
Ah! The voice froze in my throat. I turned slowly to find Okita standing behind me. What are you doing here?
Oh, you didn't notice me? Well, it's my turn to keep watch.
Of course, I was under surveillance, which meant... Did you hear everything I said? I said nothing, only smiled and blinked laconically. He'd heard me. He had definitely heard me. I wanted to scream, but before I could open my mouth, Saito stepped out from behind the door.
I think that's enough fraternizing, Soji.
Were you here the whole time too?
I arrived only moments ago.
Oh, thank goodness. I pressed my hand to my chest in an effort to calm my pounding heart. I'm sorry for screaming like that.
It's nothing. At any rate, it isn't as if you were saying anything that might cause trouble for you.
Then he had heard me. True, I didn't say anything, bad, but still. It's embarrassing being caught talking to oneself. I was so embarrassed. Saito looked from me to Okita and back, and his brows drew together almost imperceptibly.
I came to tell you that dinner is ready, but have I interrupted something?
Oh, no, nothing at all. Probably a bit of harassment on his part. I shook my head emphatically.
I had intended to wait until you and Soji finished your discussion, but...
He let his words hang in the air, but his eyes said that he determined we'd continue forever if he didn't interrupt. I had opened my mouth to say, I'm not sure what, then... Heisuke shot through the door. The moment he saw us, however, his face fell. What?
Whoa! What's going on here, Hajime? You and her are buddies now? My apologies. I was only here on business.
Heisuke perked up at Saito's apology, and he gave the other man a quick grin.
Well, it's time to eat. Let's go. If we don't hurry up, it's all gonna be gone.
Okay.
You're late.
The moment we stepped into the dining hall, Nagakura and Harada looked up at us.
You kids are late. Who's going to answer to my crying stomach?
Why does somebody have to?
You mean growling, Shin? Really, he's so simple sometimes.
You guys ought to apologize to my stomach. We wanted to dig in, but I said, no, we gotta wait for him.
How sweet.
You're such a softie, Shin. Alright guys, it's time to eat. And that means every man for himself.
What? Is everybody just gonna start fighting over the food?
Man, there's barely enough here to feed a kid, let alone a man. So, I'll just have to... take yours. Survival of the fittest. This food is mine.
Hey! Why do you always steal my food?
It's because of the difference in size, kid. I got a bigger body. That means I need more food.
Well, I'm still growing, old man, so I gotta eat more too.
Sorry you had to see this, Chizuru. They're always like this.
I've, gotten used to it.
Is acceptance of such insanity not somewhat frightening? That food is mine.
Oh, well, why aren't you taking anything?
Yeah, I'm good. If I get too full, then I start getting slow.
Is he not feeling well? It's historically known that, Soji had tuberculosis, so he's always sickly in every story.
Hey, what do you mean slow? Whatever, I'm taking that. Go for it. So long as I get a little sake to sip, I'm good. Then, I guess I'm going with sake too. Don't worry, being a freeloader or anything in Chizuru. Just eat your little heart out, okay?
I know. I can't help but feeling a little bad, though.
Well, if you let that get to you, you're gonna lose. You have to protect what's yours.
Okay. I can't imagine these guys would steal from a girl, though. I think they would let her have enough food. It was actually rather fun to have dinner with such a strange group of men. I'd eaten alone for so long that to do so with others was frightening and exhilarating all at once.
See? There's that smile. You ought to do that more often. We aren't gonna hurt you.
Harada. His mouth curled up into an honest smile of his own. Had I really looked so down? Perhaps they were all trying to cheer me up. I wasn't quite sure how to feel. There was a part of me that felt bad, while another part felt a certain amount of joy. The joy seemed to be winning out, however, and I was smiling to myself when Inoue stepped in from the hall.
Gentlemen, do you have a moment?
As usual, his voice was warm, but his eyes were a level solemnity I'd never seen before, at least during our thus far brief acquaintance. The warmth of the room disappeared almost immediately.
I've just received word from Osaka. Sanan has been gravely injured in battle.
No, not Sanan! What? They all went quiet. Inoue continued. Sanan had gone to investigate a report of several Ronin harassing a cloth merchant. He'd managed to drive them off, but not before being wounded by the Ronin. Is he going to be all right?
It wasn't his sword arm that was wounded. He's almost certain to survive, but wielding a blade will be difficult for him.
Do I have medical knowledge like my dad? Oh, thank goodness. I let out a breath. I hadn't realized I'd been holding, but it seemed like the rest of the room didn't share my relief. 'Cause his arm.
He should be returning here in a few days. No, please excuse me. I must speak to Kondo.
He turned as he spoke, his last words delivered over his shoulder, and was gone. It was Saito who eventually broke the awkward silence.
A sword is not made to be carried in a single hand. If his injury is severe, he may never carry a blade again.
Oh. At least I understood. There are some one-handed blades. Yes, Sanan was alive, but without the ability to wield a sword. Sanan, the man, had survived the encounter with the Ronin, but Sanan, the warrior, had not.
Fighting with a single hand would mean less strength behind his blows. Against an opponent of similar skill, he would almost certainly lose.
Then he should learn how to be faster. Of course. Fighting with one hand would be fighting at half strength. Even a skilled warrior would have trouble. Okita sighed.
If push comes to shove, he'll have to take it. I don't think Sanan's going to give up. Don't jinx us, Soji. It's gonna look bad if officers start joining the Corps.
Huh? Wait, that didn't make any sense. But what do you mean, Corps? Isn't that the Shinsengumi? I didn't understand. What was the Corps? If it wasn't the Shinsengumi itself, but the way they said it, they couldn't have been referring to the Shinsengumi.
Well, normally, yeah. You might call the Shinsengumi the Elite Volunteer Corps. When we talk about the Corps, though, we...
Heisuke!
Huh? Before I could move, Harada was on his feet and halfway across the room. I barely had time to gasp before he drove his fist into Heisuke.
Ow!
Heisuke, are you alright? Nagakura sighed.
Sono, you're overreacting. Heisuke, think before you open that darn mouth.
His eyes were cold and hard as he turned to look straight at me. It was clear Heisuke had told me something he shouldn't have, but what?
Sorry.
After a moment, Harada gave the younger man a curt nod of apology, and Heisuke responded with a quick pained smile.
Nah, I should have been watching what I said. Still, Sano, you start throwing things around way too easily.
His punch had hit with enough force to knock a lesser man out cold, but Heisuke seemed only slightly worse for the wear. It had never been clearer that I was not among normal people.
That's all you're going to hear about this particular topic, Chizuru. I'm sure you're curious, but we can't tell you anything else, so don't ask.
Yes, sir. His voice was friendly enough, but his eyes gave his words a cold weight that made me feel almost uncomfortable. Almost? But... no buts, just give it up, girl. How was I supposed to just drop it? Like that, don't say anything more.
The core that Heisuke was talking about are men to be pitied.
Aren't we not supposed to be talking about this anymore? Okita's voice was flat, emotionless. His eyes were grim, and there was a sudden chill melancholy about him. I couldn't bring myself to say anything more. Thankfully, Nagakura stepped in to break the silence.
It's nothing you need to worry yourself about. You don't have to get all worked up.
I was only a guest in their house, not a warrior of the Shinsengumi. I didn't need to know the truth behind whatever secrets the Shinsengumi kept. I'd known that from the beginning. That knowledge was little comfort, however.
Put it from your mind. Involving yourself in our affairs will only put you in greater danger.
I bit my lip and kept silent. The wall between us was almost a physical thing, and it was far too large an obstacle for me to defeat easily. Actually, you probably don't want to. It's safer this way, remember. Just listen to them. I finished my dinner in sad silence, excused myself, and returned to my room. I had a great deal to think about. The Shinsengumi, huh? I knew the Shinsengumi, of course. Their name meant Elite Volunteer Corps. But this corps they'd mentioned, it seemed to be something different. So, Sanan is part of the Shinsengumi, but he shouldn't be part of the corps. The way they'd said it, it seemed as if the corps was another entity inside the Shinsengumi. Ugh! No, I wasn't supposed to think about those things. I was only going to get myself in trouble if I stuck my nose in where it didn't belong. If I saw or heard something wrong, I could even end up dead. If I die, I'll have a hard time looking for my father. There were people who cared about me, and my death would no doubt sadden them. Who were these people? Just my father and the doctor? With that in mind, I did my best to put the day's events out of my head, and climbed into my thin futon. July 1864. I have totally not been paying attention to the date, so I don't know how long it's been. It was later that day that Hijikata called for me. Excuse me. I had been relieved to find Okita and Heisuke had been summoned along with me. A private conversation with only myself and Hijikata would have been cause for a significant case of nerves. I was still trying to puzzle out what to say when Hijikata began to speak, his voice cold as tempered steel.
You can leave the compound.
Really? His announcement was so sudden that I found I couldn't contain my enthusiasm. Hijikata, however, retained his composure.
You're going to accompany whoever's on duty. You jump when they say jump, and die when they say die. Are we clear?
Yes, sir. At last, I would be able to go outside. I would finally be able to begin searching for my father. My answers wouldn't show themselves immediately, I knew, but at least I was free to look for them.
Soji, Heisuke, you're on patrol today, right?
Oh, I get it now. That's why you pulled us in here, right?
The confusion that had been on his face since I'd entered lifted at last.
I think it's going to be Soji's turn this time, though. The 1st Division's doing rounds today, isn't it?
Yes, Heisuke and the 8th are going out tonight, so I think he has a point. She'll be safer during the afternoon.
He nodded at Heisuke and gave me a quick wink.
Don't forget, if you run, I'll kill you. And if we get jumped by a Ronin, I'm not sticking around to pull your ass out of the fire, okay?
He wasn't being serious, but Hijikata turned his cold glare on Okita and frowned.
No, it's not okay, you idiot. Why the hell do you think I'm sitting here with you?
Okita's only response was a short snort of a laugh. I won't run. I knew he wasn't being serious, but I couldn't stand to keep my mouth shut. When I came here, we made a deal. I promised. The Shinsengumi would help me find my father, and I would keep quiet and not run away. And I still wanted to find him, just as much as I had the day I first met the Shinsengumi. I'll keep my promise. So please, keep yours. I gave Okita a short bow, never taking my eyes off his face. The smirk that had been on his face when I began had shrunk to something smaller and more than a little awkward.
My apologies. I guess I underestimated you. You should realize, though, that there's no way to know what could happen out there. If you come with us, you're putting yourself in danger. If that's alright with you, then feel free to join us on our rounds.
Even I knew Kyoto was not safe. But I didn't care. I had to find my father. At that moment, any possible danger seemed immaterial. You might change your mind a bit later.
The Choshu have been acting up. We don't know what they're up to, but chances are it's bad for us. I'd rather not be sending you out.
He seemed to be almost talking to himself, but his tone was stern and thoughtful. The soldiers of the Choshu domain were part of the Imperial Nationalist Party. They had been increasingly turning to force in their pursuit of these goals. The Shinsengumi, on the other hand, were loyal to the shogun. Since their masters were at odds, the Shinsengumi and the Choshu domain were enemies. It occurred to me that the increased activity of the Choshu domain had likely made it difficult for the Shinsengumi to shoulder a burden such as me. Why are you giving me permission to leave the compound at a time like this, then? Hijikata's face hardened, and he looked away. They really need my father, huh?
Kodo hasn't come back to Edo, and we've heard that a couple of people saw someone around Kyoto. It might not be him, but it matches his description. Besides, I've kept you locked up almost half a year.
Man, it's been a long time.
The Choshu are a threat, but if it wasn't them, it'd be someone else. I have to let you out sometime or you'll never find anything.
It wasn't what I'd expected to hear from them. What did I expect exactly? He was right that they'd postponed my search for my father for quite some time. What I hadn't expected was that he would give any thought to my feelings on the matter. Thank you very much. I bowed as I spoke, not sure what else I could do to express my gratitude. Hijikata only turned back to his work.
Besides, plenty of our guys aren't feeling so hot these days. We aren't exactly in top condition, are we?
Why did he just say that? That makes me feel worse because you guys might not be able to protect me. Heisuke's joking didn't seem to appeal to Hijikata, who only frowned more deeply. Well, it has been awfully hot lately. And it certainly had been. Day after day, the sun burned down on Kyoto from a cloudless sky, and all of the rooms in the compound were so humid that I felt dizzy as soon as I stepped inside. I had heard that the heat had been too much for some of the Shinsengumi soldiers, and they'd taken ill.
If you want to go, you can go. You have my permission.
All right. I sat there for a moment and considered my options. There was something in his words and demeanor that told me he didn't want me to leave the compound. Still, if I was with Okita or Heisuke, I had no doubt that I'd be safe and well protected. On the other hand, my presence could easily be an undue burden to them. What was I to do? Let's see, what am I supposed to do? I am supposed to remain in the compound. Yeah, because I don't want to date either of those guys yet. You two will have your time. In the end, I decided not to leave. They had enough on their minds without having to worry about me. Still, I couldn't keep myself from feeling a little sad about it. I gave my head a shake. Alright, what should I do today? For the past 6 months, I'd done little more than run inconsequential errands for the Shinsengumi. I'd also helped clean the compound and prepare meals, and eventually I'd learn how to best help without getting in the way. Most of my time was spent with the captains, but on the occasions where I'd bump into the rank-and-file soldiers, I'd gotten to a point where I could speak to them easily enough, probably because they thought I was just a page. My desire to find my father had kept me from trying to run away. I think they finally started to trust me, at least I hope they have. Some of them still weren't terribly nice to me, like Okita, but by large, they'd begun to give me a little more freedom. It sure was hot. What should I do today? My mind was completely blank. It was too hot to think. Of course! I'd go to the central courtyard. There was usually a breeze there, and if I stayed in the shade, it would probably be quite cool. My hopes and dreams of a comfortable afternoon were shattered. There's no wind! The sun's heat was unrelenting. Normally, a nice cool breeze would have given me a chance to feel comfortable, but I had a feeling it was going to be a bad day. Shade was the best I could hope for, it seemed. I sighed and sat down in the deepest shade I could find. As I watched the sun roast Kyoto, something occurred to me. Oh right, my father's been here, hasn't he? They told me as much, but they hadn't told me why. Had he been tending to the injured, or perhaps educating the Shinsengumi on how to avoid illness? No, that didn't sound like him. He'd visited only a few times, or so I'd been told. If he hadn't really been the Shinsengumi's doctor, then he would have visited far more often. Which left me with my question, why? It had already been made clear to me that the Shinsengumi had plenty of secrets that I wasn't meant to know. I had a feeling that whatever my father had been up to, it had something to do with those secrets. No, that can't be right, can it? I shook my head again, trying my best to dispel the dark thoughts taking shape there.
What can't be right?
Ah! I spun around to find Sanan had walked up behind me, utterly undetected and unannounced. Oh, Sanan! Is it alright for you to be walking around?
Please, I know better than an invalid. There's nothing wrong with me.
When he spoke, there was a hint of coldness in his voice.
Although, I suppose my left hand is something of an invalid.
I couldn't bear to look at the sad, twisted smile he gave me. His arm hadn't healed, and it seemed certain now that it never would. The rest of the captain seemed sure that he would never be able to use his arm as he'd done before.
And what are you doing? Are you allowed out of your room? You haven't been given the run of the headquarters, I'm sure.
Yes, I know. I'm sorry. They usually let me walk around as I pleased, so long as I didn't go into anyone's room, but I knew that, technically, I was still confined to my headquarters. Whatever freedom I had was out of kindness, nothing more. In other words, Sanan was right. If he decided to chastise me for being in the courtyard, I had no reasonable response. There were some things I wanted to think about. I hoped the courtyard would be cooler than my room. The moment the words were out of my mouth, I realized they sounded far more like childish excuses than any sort of real explanation.
When you sneak around without permission, it makes it seem as if you have something to hide.
I'm sorry. Oh, it's pretty valid that you want to go out and cool off. I mean, it's hot in there. My explanation had been poor, certainly, but he could have at least pretended to acknowledge it. Still, I was beginning to grow accustomed to the subtle cruelty that seemed to accompany each word out of Sanan's mouth. Alright, I'm going back to my room then. I turned and began to walk away. Sanan's unpleasantness had started after he'd been injured during his trip to Osaka. He spent most of his time locked in his room now, and he was quick to take out his frustrations on other people. I knew the loss of his arm had hurt him, probably more than I could understand, but I wished that he would go back to being the warm, kind man he'd been when I'd met him. I turned around to see him still standing there. What are you looking at? It's really hot out today. You should try and stay out of the sun, and please take care of yourself. I gave him a nervous little laugh, and he responded with a chuckle of his own. His smile didn't look forced.
Thank you. Please take care of yourself as well.
Okay. Oh, why can't I date you, Sanan? Somewhere in there, the Sanan I'd first met was still there. My spirits lifted. I ran back to my room. Where it's hot and stuffy. It was later that evening that the compound exploded with activity. I was walking down the hall when I heard footsteps and turned to see Nagakura coming toward me. Nagakura? What's that for? He glanced down almost absently at his hands, which held a candle and an exceptionally long needle.
One of the Choshu guys we picked up isn't talking. The commander's gonna talk to him personally, but He said he didn't have the right, tools, and sent me out to get these.
I don't understand. Oh, Chizuru, don't be another clueless heroine. I got that they'd captured someone, but what were the needle and candle for?
Huh. Look, kid, ignorance is bliss, alright? Don't think about it too much.
He gave me another bark of laughter, and then headed past me down the hall. I still didn't know what he meant. I guess it's better you don't know if you already don't get it. As the sun began to set, the activity in the compound reached a fever pitch. Heisuke! He shot past my door as I called out, then wheeled back around. What happened? All the men are running around. Did you get some information out of the Choshu man you captured? He nodded.
It looks like they're having a meeting right now. We're getting ready for a raid.
Oh. Heisuke went on to explain the Shinsengumi would be splitting into 2 groups and searching locations at opposite ends of the city. Kondo would take 10 men to the Ikeda Inn, and Hijikata would take 24 to the Shikoku Inn.
I heard that they're probably at Shikoku. Gotta say, I'm kinda pissed the chief's sending me out to Ikeda.
Yeah, but you never know. It could be the opposite. They'd send more men with Hijikata because they thought he'd probably be seeing action. Kondo and his men were just to make sure they covered all their bases. You mean there aren't even 40 men to move? I'd known that the heat in close quarters had made some of the men sick, but I hadn't known it was so many. Heisuke sighed.
We sent word to Aizu and the Judiciary Commissioner, but it looks like they're just gonna sit on their hands.
It sounds like you got your work cut out for you. Unfortunately, there wasn't much I could offer them apart from sympathy. I had a feeling it was going to be a difficult night. After all the men capable of fighting had left for their respective assignments, Sanin called for me. Why is he calling for me, alone in the middle of the night? Sanin! I'm sure it was only out of courtessy, but the chief has asked me to protect the compound. It's almost empty, of course, but someone may try to attack us for that very reason. So I must ask you to stay where I can keep a close eye on you. I may need to give you orders, should the worst occur. Okay. I hesitated a moment, then spoke. Does that mean you'll protect me? I wasn't sure why, but he laughed at that. Well, I should hope I'll be more use than the men who've been confined to their beds at least. Was I supposed to be happy? His smile was so sad, I wasn't sure what I should say. It seemed to hurt him the most when the rest of the men were out fighting. All he was able to do was wait. The silence between us stretched out until suddenly the door to our room opened without a sound.
Colonel Sanin, we've confirmed the Choshu are meeting at Ikeda.
The Ikeda Inn? Oh, it's not what they expected.
Oh dear, that's less than desirable.
I suppose the Shinsengumi has never been good with games of chance. His tone was light, but his face was serious, and with good reason. They had been certain Shikoku was the right location, and had sent only half as many men to Ikeda. Yamazaki, can you do me a favor? The man who had called Yamazaki nodded curtly. First, tell Hijikata that the enemy is at Ikeda. He should still be on his way to Shikoku. And I'm sorry to trouble you with it, but I need you to take this child with you as well. What? Me? Why? This child? Wait! Was he talking about me? Yamazaki seemed just as surprised.
I don't mean to be rude, Colonel, but if all you need is a message delivered, I think I can handle that by myself.
Yamazaki's cold eyes slid over me for a moment as he spoke. There may be Ronin out there to intercept you. There was a chance Choshu had support, he continued. If Yamazaki encountered resistance, it would take longer for his message to reach Hijikata, perhaps too long, assuming, of course, that it reached him at all. Sanin finished with a soft smile I hadn't seen him use for weeks. Do you see what I'm trying to say? Yamazaki nodded.
If the worst should happen, I can hold off the Choshu Ronin and give her the message.
Oh! I gulped. It sounded as if they were suggesting that, if things went badly, Yamazaki should sacrifice himself.
Yes, of course. I doubt it will come to that.
We're short on men right now, which means there's more I need you to do. You'll need to notify the Aizu and Judiciary Commissioner as well. That would have Yamazaki running all over Kyoto, I suppose it really drove home just now that the Shinsengumi was stretched. Apart from Yamazaki and Sanin, the only other person available to carry messages was me. So I guess we'll be carrying messages. It's about time I repaid their hospitality anyway. We've just been sponging off them here. I mean, they kind of forced me to sponge off them, but I suppose it's worth it to pay them for the food and all. Well, anyway, I will continue this in the next video. Hope to see you there or in some of my other future videos. And I'd be so grateful for any likes, comments, subscriptions, or shares with your friends to show some support. Thank you so much for joining me, and I wish you all health, happiness, and safety. Dirili signing out. Bye-bye, everybody.